Every year, the world consumes more than 240 billion liters of alcoholic beverages, a massive flow large enough to sustain an industry worth trillions of dollars. But behind that scale lies a paradox. Even a slight deviation in yeast, temperature, or aging barrels can cause an entire batch to lose its value. So how do factories manage to produce millions of liters every day without compromising quality? In this video, you'll step inside the operational system of the alcohol industry, where every element, from oak to the distillation process, is controlled with near-perfect precision. First, let's begin with the cork, a small component that, each year, determines the fate of over 20 billion bottles of wine, representing tens of billions of dollars in global value. In Portugal's Montado, the ecosystem that supplies more than 50% of the world's production, 730,000 hectares of cork oak forests are not just a raw material source, but a nationally protected heritage, regulated with a level of strictness comparable to port wine. Unlike timber used in furniture, cork production begins with a harvesting technique that removes the bark without cutting down the tree. This process is only permitted once the tree reaches at least 25 years of age, and the bark attains a standard thickness of 25 millimeters. Skilled workers, known as descortisadores, use lever-action axes to make precise, decisive cuts along the trunk and major branches. The critical objective is to separate the bark without damaging the cambium, the vital layer through which the tree's life-sustaining sap flows. A cut that is too deep can kill the tree. Too shallow, and the valuable bark will fracture. This level of difficulty has made cork harvesting one of the highest-paid agricultural professions in Portugal, with earnings reaching up to $900 per week, 5 times that of typical farm labor. After harvesting, the trunk reveals a bright orange inner layer and is marked with white chalk. For example, the number 6 for the year 2026, indicating the next harvest exactly 9 years later. With a lifespan of up to 200 years, a single cork oak tree can be harvested as many as 15 times. However, there is a crucial reality. The first 2 harvests typically do not produce bark of sufficient quality for natural cork stoppers. As a result, producers must wait over 40 years to obtain the first premium-grade material, known as Amadia cork. After harvesting, the raw cork slabs are not sent directly into production, but are instead transported to large-scale storage yards. Here, thousands of tons of cork are stacked into massive piles and left to air-dry outdoors for 6 months to a year, allowing the cellular structure to stabilize, excess sap to be released, and moisture levels to naturally balance with the environment. Once this aging phase is complete, workers use specialized saws or industrial cutting machines to remove all damaged edges, pest-affected areas, and irregular sections. The qualified portions are then cut into uniformly sized sheets, a crucial step that ensures the material can fully absorb heat during the next stage of processing. Inside the factory, the cork slabs are loaded into large steel cages and fed into an automated boiling system using purified water at 100 degrees Celsius. This process not only eliminates microorganisms, but also triggers a structural transformation. The high temperature expands the air pockets within the cork, increasing its volume by around 20% and turning the initially rigid material into something as flexible as leather. Immediately after leaving the boiling tanks, the hot slabs are transferred directly into pressing machines to remove any natural warping. The result is perfectly flattened sheets with exceptionally high elasticity, ready for the next stage of cork punching with near-perfect mechanical precision. Once the optimal moisture level is reached, the cork sheets are cut into strips with widths matching the length of the final stoppers. Skilled workers then use punching machines to drill directly into the grain, producing natural cork stoppers, the most premium segment reserved for high-end wines due to their uniform cell structure. With the assistance of these machines, a single worker can accurately produce between 10,000 and 20,000 cork stoppers per day. At Amarum, the world's largest cork producer, output can reach up to 22 million stoppers per day. After punching, the raw cork stoppers are immediately transferred to drying chambers to reduce moisture content to a standard level of 6%, effectively eliminating the conditions that allow mold to develop. They are then processed through centrifugal polishing systems, which smooth the surface and remove any rough imperfections to ensure a perfectly refined finish when in contact with the bottleneck. This stage concludes with sterilization using steam or ozone, completely eliminating TCA compounds, the primary cause of the musty off odors commonly found in low-quality corks. At the end of the production line, a 360-degree camera system powered by AI algorithms classifies cork stoppers into 7 grades based on cell density and surface quality. Premium-grade corks are then laser engraved with branding before being vacuum sealed for shipment. Why do 70% of the world's wines, especially premium ones, still use cork? Because each cubic centimeter of cork contains around 40 million air-filled cells, allowing it to seal the bottle tightly while maintaining long-term elasticity, something synthetic materials have yet to replicate. More importantly, cork allows a tiny amount of oxygen to pass through, enabling the wine to breathe, soften its structure, and develop more complex flavors over time. A product invented over 2,000 years ago, virtually unchanged, yet still essential to global trade, the oak barrel. From a simple transport tool, it has become a key element shaping the character of nearly all premium spirits, including whiskey, bourbon, and cognac. The journey begins in oak forests across the United States and Europe, primarily American white oak and French oak, 2 types of wood dense enough to hold liquid while still allowing microoxygenation. From there, the wood is transported to specialized cooperatives. After being split along the grain and naturally air-dried for 18 to 24 months, the staves are manually assembled into steel hoops, where precise angling of each piece forms a perfectly sealed curved structure. Under the pressure of hydraulic machines and reinforced steel bands, the wood is forced into a standard barrel shape without the use of glue or nails. It is the immense internal pressure between the staves that ensures the barrel's durability for decades, without leaking a single drop. Next comes the charring stage, the turning point that defines the soul of the spirit. Here, the inner surface of the barrel is exposed to gas flames at temperatures reaching up to 250 degrees Celsius for 40 to 60 seconds. This heat triggers the caramelization of natural cellulose sugars, forming a layer of activated char about 2 to 4 millimeters thick. This layer acts as a chemical filter that absorbs sulfur compounds while releasing lignin and vanillin. As a result, up to 70% of the spirit's flavor and its signature amber color are developed without any artificial additives. However, few people realize this. Oak is never completely sealed. Each year, about 2 to 3% of the liquid evaporates through microscopic pores in the wood. Distillers call this the angel's share, an inevitable loss, a sacrifice to nature in exchange for a richer structure, deeper character, and that distinctive amber hue through slow oxidation. In the United States, bourbon, with more than 12 million barrels aging in Kentucky, nearly 3 times the state's population, is protected by strict regulations. It cannot be legally recognized as bourbon unless it is aged in new, charred American white oak barrels. And now we step into the world of bourbon, the only spirit officially recognized by the U.S. Congress as a national heritage, where a bottle of Old Rip Van Winkle 25-year-old can sell for up to $65,000, comparable to a brand new Tesla Model S. To qualify as bourbon, the grain mash bill is fundamental. By law, it must contain at least 51% corn, the component responsible for the spirit's signature sweetness and richness. The remaining portion typically includes rye for added spice and malted barley to support enzymatic conversion. Each day, hundreds of tons of grain are finely ground and cooked with purified limestone water to convert starch into sugar. The mixture is then transferred into massive fermentation tanks with capacities of up to 150,000 liters. Here, proprietary yeast strains, carefully preserved at -125°C to ensure consistency over decades, work continuously for about 6 days, converting sugars into alcohol and producing a raw liquid known as distiller's beer. To refine this distiller's beer into a premium spirit, distillation is carried out using tall column still systems. The liquid is heated, alcohol vapors rise and condense into a clear distillate with an alcohol content of around 70%, known as white dog. At this stage, the spirit is still harsh and grainy, lacking both color and the complex flavors developed during aging. From this point on, millions of charred new American white oak fibers begin to play a critical role, acting as a natural chemical reactor that shapes the spirit's identity. As the clear distillate fills the barrel, temperature fluctuations inside 7-story rickhouses trigger a high-pressure extraction cycle. The wood expands and contracts continuously, forcing the liquid through a 4mm layer of activated char to dissolve lignin and vanillin, then drawing it back in, carrying with it the amber color and up to 70% of the spirit's flavor profile. So what would happen if distillers replaced new oak barrels with cheaper materials to cut costs? In reality, without this intense interaction with fresh oak, bourbon would remain a harsh, colorless spirit, lacking depth and character. More importantly, failing to comply with oak barrel regulations wouldn't just erase its identity, it would also violate strict legal standards for the bourbon label, a protected heritage, much like how the French safeguard the champagne industry. Leaving Kentucky for Tennessee, we encounter an even more intricate process at the distillery of Jack Daniel's. It's hard to believe that this world-famous whiskey is produced in a town where its sale is technically illegal. Yet that hasn't stopped more than 150 million bottles from being shipped each year to over 170 countries. In fact, its iconic square bottle alone is enough for instant recognition, even without the label. To create its signature smooth character, Jack Daniel's processes around 450,000 kilograms of grain each day, using a precise mash bill of 80% corn for sweetness, 12% malted barley, and 8% rye for a subtle spicy finish. The grains are finely ground and cooked with iron-free limestone spring water, activating enzymes from the malt to convert starch into sugar. The mixture is then transferred into massive fermentation tanks, where proprietary yeast strains, carefully preserved since the Prohibition era, transform the sugars into a rich distiller's beer. After distillation, the resulting spirit is a clear liquid at around 70% alcohol, known as green whiskey. At this stage, it remains harsh and intense. To transform it into a premium whiskey, Jack Daniel's uses a proprietary method developed over 150 years ago, known as the Lincoln County process. First, sugar maple wood is harvested in the fall, air-dried for 12 months, and then burned using high-proof whiskey to produce pure charcoal. The green whiskey is then slowly filtered through more than 3-meter-deep charcoal vats, taking up to 10 days for each drop to pass through. This slow filtration acts as a natural chemical filter, removing harsh impurities while imparting a smoother character with subtle smoky notes. A defining step that distinguishes Tennessee whiskey from conventional bourbon. At the final stage, the spirit is filled into new, charred American white oak barrels, where the inner layer has been caramelized to unlock the wood's natural sugars. Every hour, around 500 barrels are filled, beginning a minimum 4-year aging journey across 74 massive rickhouses. At Jack Daniel's, barrel placement is a key factor in determining product value. Barrels stored on the upper floors are exposed to the most extreme temperature fluctuations. The wood breathes more intensely, pushing the spirit deeper into the oak, resulting in a richer flavor profile and the highest market value. After at least 4 years in these premium positions, only barrels that pass the rigorous evaluation of the master distiller are selected for bottling. At this stage, iron-free limestone spring water is precisely added to reduce the alcohol content to 47%, a golden level that maximizes the release of ester and vanillin compounds, helping make Jack Daniel's one of the fastest-selling American whiskeys, with an average of 5 bottles consumed every second worldwide. Although they share the same origin in the tobacco plant, cigarettes represent fast consumption, while cigars exist on an entirely different level, one where sophistication is tied to knowledge, and appreciation demands patience and a certain depth of understanding. Unlike cigarettes that can be finished in just 2 minutes, a proper cigar requires several hours to burn. This quiet passage of time guides the aficionado through 3 distinct flavor stages: a gentle opening of wood and dry grass, a richer middle marked by chocolate and spice, and finally a bold, concentrated finish as the essence gathers toward the end of the cigar. The appeal is so compelling that Winston Churchill, the legendary British Prime Minister and one of cigars' most devoted admirers, reportedly smoked up to 250,000 cigars in his lifetime, even lending his name to what is now recognized as a standard cigar size, the Churchill. Once dominating the global cigar landscape, Cuba has long been regarded as the sanctuary of premium cigars, where each handcrafted piece preserves a legacy of tradition. Today, however, the title of the world's largest cigar exporter belongs to the Dominican Republic, producing around 8 billion cigars annually in both machine-made and handmade forms. So which do you prefer? The patient ritual of handmade cigars, or the convenience of modern machine-made options? Every masterpiece begins with its most original essence, and for cigars, that essence lies in the vibrant life within the tobacco plant. In the Dominican Republic, key cultivation areas stretch across thousands of hectares in the Cibao Valley. This region, nourished by 3 major rivers, forms a fertile alluvial basin with an ideal pH balance for growing premium tobacco. Life begins with seeds finer than the tip of a needle, carefully selected and sown into sterile soil trays, then lightly covered with a thin layer of substrate to retain moisture while welcoming the first rays of sunlight. Inside greenhouses, each young sprout is nurtured under a precise nutritional regimen. Temperature and humidity are monitored hourly, ensuring complete protection from external disease. After 4 to 6 weeks, once the seedlings reach 15 to 20 centimeters in height, they are strong enough to be transplanted into open fields. At renowned estates, transplanting remains a purely manual ritual. Each seedling is placed into loosened soil, spaced exactly a hand's width apart, a standard distance that allows roots to penetrate deeply while preventing mature leaves from overlapping and competing for nutrients. Although some modern farms have introduced machinery to assist the process, this spacing rule remains unchanged. On large plantations in the Dominican Republic and Nicaragua, farmers still uphold a strict discipline. Planting takes place only at dawn. In those brief early hours, when sunlight is gentle and the soil still holds the night's moisture, young plants can anchor immediately without thermal shock or dehydration. A simple principle, yet the foundation of million-dollar cigars. Once the tobacco plants have taken root and stabilized in the fields, the most critical phase truly begins, controlling how the plant grows. Over the next 6 to 8 weeks, the goal is no longer to encourage rapid growth, but to direct it with precision. Growers monitor every subtle change, the shift of leaves from pale green to deep green, the elasticity of the stalk, the moisture level in the soil after each irrigation. If growth is too aggressive, the leaves become thin and lack essential oils. If water is insufficient, the leaf structure turns dry and fibrous. Every adjustment is made to achieve balance, a state where the leaves are thick enough, rich enough in oils, and resilient enough to withstand the fermentation process that follows. When the plant reaches about 1.2 to 1.5 meters in height, pale purple flower buds begin to appear at the top. This marks a decisive moment. Before the flowers can bloom, farmers perform topping, a simple yet strategic act. By removing the upper bud, the plant is forced to abandon reproduction and redirect its full energy into leaf development. At the same time, side shoots are pruned away to prevent nutrients from being dispersed. The difference between cigarettes and cigars becomes evident at the harvesting stage. Industrial tobacco is collected by machine to maximize yield, while cigar tobacco is still harvested entirely by hand, slower but more precise, preserving the full integrity of each leaf. The harvest does not take place all at once but extends over more than a month, carried out leaf by leaf from the bottom of the plant upward, following 3 distinct flavor tiers. The lowest tier is Volado, accounting for roughly 30% of the cigar's filler structure. These thin, lightweight leaves serve as the combustion base within the cigar. With their lower oil content and porous structure, Volado helps maintain a steady burn for up to 120 minutes of smoking. About a week later, the middle tier, Viso, is harvested to provide aroma and balance to the flavor profile. This layer forms the body of the cigar, contributing significantly to its overall taste and the complexity that develops during the middle stage of the smoke. Finally comes Ligero, the thickest leaves from the top of the plant, typically representing only 10–15% of the total yield. Rich in oils and nicotine due to direct exposure to sunlight, Ligero determines the cigar's strength, weight, and its long, lingering finish, defining characteristics of a premium cigar. After harvesting, the tobacco leaves are not sent to industrial dryers, but transported directly to traditional curing barns for natural processing. Here, workers use a needle to pierce through the thick central vein of each leaf, tying them into symmetrical pairs along long strands of twine. These strings of leaves are then hung across wooden beams that run the length of the barn. Depending on the tobacco variety and the intended flavor profile, growers may choose air curing, sun curing, heat curing, or fire curing. This stage is not merely about removing moisture, it is a slow biological transformation. Chlorophyll gradually breaks down while aromatic compounds begin to form. The scent inside the curing barn shifts noticeably over time. In the early days, the air carries a sharp, slightly sour smell of fresh grass. As the process continues, the leaves begin to release a softer, sweeter aroma. The leaves are hung densely from ceiling to floor and left to dry slowly for about 30 to 45 days. During this time, their color changes from green to yellow, eventually settling into a copper-brown tone when properly cured. Experienced workers assess maturity entirely by touch and smell rather than machines. They regulate humidity and airflow by opening and closing the wooden windows along the barn walls. A miscalculation of just a few hours can cause the entire batch to become brittle, moldy, or rotten, resulting in the complete loss of its delicate aroma. Once the tobacco leaves reach the proper level of suppleness, they are stacked into large piles known as pilones. At this stage, the leaves compress under their own weight, triggering natural biochemical reactions that help eliminate harshness, release ammonia, and develop distinctive flavor notes such as earth, wood, and cocoa. Fermentation time is carefully adjusted according to the characteristics of each leaf tier. Thick, oil-rich Ligero leaves may require up to 6 weeks, while thinner leaves, such as Viso and Velato, typically need only 3 to 4 weeks. By the end of this stage, the tobacco loses its raw sharpness, becoming smoother and ready to enter the final phase of refinement. To maintain quality control, workers insert metal probes into the center of each pile to monitor temperature. If it rises above 122 degrees Fahrenheit, the entire stack must be dismantled and turned by hand immediately to release excess heat before being rebuilt. This turning process is repeated 3 to 5 times throughout the fermentation cycle to ensure uniform transformation across every leaf.
At 110, the pilon said that we need to rotate it.
After completing the first fermentation stage, each tobacco leaf has undergone a noticeable transformation in both color and aroma. This marks the moment when master craftsmen begin the manual sorting process to determine the fate of every single leaf. Based on thickness, oil content, and elasticity, the leaves are separated into 3 categories: filler for the core, binder to maintain structure, and wrapper for the outer layer, the leaf chosen for its flawless appearance. Before blending, the central vein must be removed to ensure an even burn and prevent harshness. Since the vein cannot be separated when the leaf is dry, bundles of tobacco are rehydrated in controlled rooms for 12 to 24 hours until they reach the ideal level of pliability. Using skilled hands, workers pull along the length of each leaf to strip the vein manually from base to tip. For wrapper and binder leaves, the vein is removed entirely to create a smooth, unblemished surface. In contrast, filler leaves retain a small, carefully measured portion of the vein to preserve structural integrity and maintain a steady, prolonged burn throughout the cigar. After the initial processing stage, the tobacco leaves move into a quieter phase, one that directly determines the final caliber of the product: aging. At this point, bundles of leaves are carefully arranged in dedicated aging rooms, where time becomes the most valuable ingredient in eliminating any remaining harshness and residual ammonia. Some premium wrapper leaves may undergo up to 10 years of quiet maturation before they are deemed ready for use. To preserve full traceability, each bundle is meticulously labeled with details such as the tobacco variety, its position on the plant, and the date the aging cycle began. Once the flavor reaches full maturity, the leaves enter the blending stage to create a perfectly balanced symphony of aromas. This is where master blenders carry out their most critical task: combining different types of leaves so they complement one another according to a closely guarded formula. The secret lies in the precise proportions: how much Ligero to provide strength, how much Viso to balance the aroma, and how much Velato to ensure a steady burn. Some leaves are selected to maintain combustion, others to define the dominant aroma, while the rest add depth and warmth to the finish. The most experienced experts can assess subtle differences in quality through nothing more than a gentle touch of the fingertips or the scent released into the air. At last, all the waiting and accumulated craftsmanship converge at the rolling table, where loose leaves are given a soul by the hands of an artisan, becoming premium cigars. Not everyone is qualified to stand at this station. Only master rollers, typically ranked from grade 7 to grade 9, with at least 10 to 20 years of disciplined practice, possess the refined touch capable of replacing even the most precise measuring instruments. These torcedores rely on instinct and tactile sensitivity honed over decades. The process begins with the core, where filler leaves are carefully layered and rolled into a calculated loose spiral. This technique creates microscopic air channels running through the body of the cigar. If rolled too tightly, the draw becomes restricted. Too loosely, and the cigar burns hot and fast, destroying the complexity of flavor. A resilient binder leaf is then wrapped around the core to secure the structure before the cigar is placed into a wooden mold to ensure perfect uniformity in size and shape. The true turning point lies in the final wrapper. Using a crescent-shaped blade, the artisan trims the wrapper into a smooth, curved strip, then stretches it precisely before wrapping it around the cigar's body. This tension conceals seams and veins, creating a surface as smooth as leather. A hallmark of high-end cigars. In the final touch, a single drop of natural vegetable glue seals the cap, preserving structural purity. A properly handmade cigar should feel firm yet resilient, like dense foam, and hold a long ash without crumbling. An artisan typically rolls only 100 to 150 cigars per day to maintain consistent quality. Though it may take just 2 to 5 minutes to complete one cigar, achieving millimeter-level precision requires a lifetime devoted to the craft. Once completed, a cigar cannot be packaged immediately after leaving the rolling table. It must first pass through a rigorous quality control process to ensure perfection in both appearance and structure. Inspectors rotate each cigar under strong lighting to confirm that the wrapper is evenly colored, free of tears or wrinkles. They gently press along the body to assess firmness, making sure the filler is evenly distributed with no soft spots and no excessive tightness that could restrict airflow during smoking. Those that meet the standard are transferred to a resting room for an additional 4 to 12 weeks, allowing the different leaves to marry and the flavors to reach full balance. Among packaging options such as paper or synthetic materials, Spanish cedar is preferred for its strict biological preservation qualities. Its unique fiber structure allows the cigar to breathe, naturally stabilizes humidity at around 65 to 70%, and prevents cigar beetle infestation without altering the cigar's natural aroma. Finally, each box is sealed and accompanied by a certificate detailing the batch number, harvest year, and the name of the master roller to ensure full traceability. As you can see, $1 million price tag does not pay merely for dried leaves, but for millimeter-level precision in airflow and years of meticulous biological control. However, it is important not to assume that cigars are less harmful than cigarettes. In fact, the nicotine content in a single cigar can be 10 to 20 times higher than that of a regular cigarette. Even without inhaling deeply, toxins can still be absorbed through the lining of the mouth, increasing the risk of addiction and serious diseases affecting the throat and respiratory system. Cigar appreciation, therefore, is not about seeking a safer alternative, but about experiencing a flavor, a rhythm, and a ritual that conventional cigarettes do not offer. Few people know that Chef Boyardee ravioli was born as a pivotal twist that helped spaghetti enter industrial-scale production. As urban populations surged, the pressure to feed sprawling metropolises increased, and the demand for durable, transportable food that still maintained quality became a standard from the 20th century onward. But unlike any traditional long spaghetti, Chef Boyardee conquered the mass market while taking a distinct approach. Using square pillow-shaped ravioli allowed the soft pasta to fully encase the meat and sauce, making each portion compact enough to fit in a can and easy to eat directly with just a spoon. To this day, billions of cans of Chef Boyardee are produced each year, carrying the smiling face of auteur Hector Boyardee, who personally oversaw the recipes and production process for nearly 20 years before passing the brand to American Home Foods. This journey began with a simple observation at his restaurant. The number of customers buying sauce to take home far exceeded those dining in, revealing a demand for flexible eating beyond the traditional dining table. And now, let's step into one of the most crucial starting points. The vast tomato fields stretching over hundreds of thousands of hectares, the indispensable foundation of every red sauce spaghetti. In Pennsylvania, the land Chef Boyardee chose for his sauce. The warm summers, long days, and marked day-night temperature swings create ideal conditions for tomatoes to accumulate high dry matter, retain a stable red color, and develop a rich flavor when concentrated into sauce. Starting in August, when the tomatoes ripen all at once, the entire field enters a massive harvesting cycle. Self-propelled harvesters move across the rows, with cutting blades set about 4 centimeters below the surface to collect entire tomato beds while preserving the topsoil. Immediately after cutting, vibrating conveyors lift the plants, fruit, and soil onto the machine. Vibrations at a fixed frequency cause the ripe tomatoes to detach naturally from their stems, while soil and biomass fall back to the field, returning organic matter and maintaining ground cover. The tomatoes are then continuously guided onto an elevating conveyor and dumped into trailing bins, all while the machine maintains a steady forward speed. Under flat field conditions, uniform ripeness, and dry weather, each machine can harvest up to 80 tons per hour, producing a consistent and abundant supply, transforming the tomatoes into the key foundation for the thick, durable, and uniform sauce in every can of Chef Boyardee ravioli. Beyond tomatoes, the pasta layer made from wheat forms the essential foundation that shapes the very first bite of every ravioli. It all begins with the autumn harvest in the Midwest, which produces over 400 million tons of hard red winter wheat annually. Chef Boyardee's primary source for creating pasta that's both firm and pliable enough to cradle the filling and sauce perfectly. Once the kernels have fully accumulated starch and protein, reaching the right hardness for industrial milling, they are harvested using 500 horsepower combine harvesters on large-scale fields. The cutter head feeds the entire wheat stalk into the machine, where an auger moves the biomass into the threshing chamber. Here, the threshing drum separates the grain from the chaff with carefully controlled force to minimize breakage. Lightweight straw and husks are returned to the fields, while the heavier kernels are funneled directly into the storage compartment. When the bin reaches capacity, the discharge spout swivels toward a parallel transport vehicle, allowing the grain to be dumped directly without interrupting the harvesting rhythm. From these fully loaded bins, the wheat is then sent to silos and milling plants across the Midwest, producing around 50 million tons of wheat annually in the U.S., creating a stable supply that supports the continuous production of millions of cans of Chef Boyardee ravioli. And now, we arrive at the Angus cattle farms, the starting point for the rich filling, the element that defines the sense of fullness from the very first bite. In the early stages of life, calves stay with their mothers on natural pastures, grazing on tender, easily digestible grass to develop a stable digestive system and a strong skeletal frame, laying the foundation for steady growth later on. When separated from their mothers, the herd moves into a semi-free-range system. Their main diet consists of dry hay, alfalfa, and trace minerals, which keeps the rumen functioning smoothly, stabilizes fermentation, minimizes metabolic fluctuations, and promotes fine muscle fiber development. During the finishing stage, as muscle growth slows to allow energy accumulation before slaughter, Angus cattle are supplemented with grains such as corn, barley, and soy, conditions that promote the signature marbling, helping the meat retain moisture and remain stable when ground. On average, a full growth cycle lasts about 18 months, with cattle reaching 550 to 650 kilograms, an optimal weight for both steaks and industrially ground meat. It's this consistency throughout the entire process that makes Angus the core choice for Chef Boyardee, the foundation for meat batches that withstand high heat cooking and pressure sterilization while keeping full flavor, distinct grain, and that genuine, satisfying texture even in a canned product. Leaving the fields, all the main ingredients officially enter the factory before the tomatoes oxidize, darken, and lose structure. The wheat absorbs moisture, reducing dough elasticity, or the meat begins to lose water and undergo protein changes, throwing the entire batch off its technical specifications. Within just 6 hours of harvest, all the tomatoes are brought directly to the factory's receiving area, passing through an automated sorting system to remove unripe, damaged, or contaminated fruit. The tomatoes are then high-pressure washed, coarsely crushed, and rapidly heated to deactivate enzymes, lock in their natural red color, and stabilize dry matter content, creating a uniform input for the sauce cooking process. The Chef Boyardee ravioli process begins in an industrial steel kettle with a capacity of about 1,500 gallons, where water, sugar, and concentrated tomatoes are heated and continuously stirred to create a uniform sauce base. Once the mixture reaches a steady, gentle simmer, basil, rosemary, paprika, and a proprietary blend of seasonings are added. Over the course of roughly 60 minutes, mechanical paddles maintain constant motion to control consistency, color, and aroma, standardizing the sauce base before it moves on to the next stage. In parallel with the sauce, freshly ground beef is received daily and transferred into large heated mixing kettles, combined with chopped carrots, dried onions, garlic, and seasonings. The heating process, accompanied by continuous stirring, ensures the meat breaks apart evenly, releases its natural juices, and absorbs the spices, producing a filling with controlled texture and moisture, ready for the forming stage. Meanwhile, in the pasta section, semolina is fed directly from the silos into heavy-duty cross-arm mixers, where water is added in precise proportions. During mixing, gluten develops, forming the structural framework for the pasta. After about 10 minutes, the dough is transferred to a vacuum mixing chamber to remove excess air, stabilize the structure, and minimize surface defects in the cans. Kneading continues until the dough reaches the desired consistency and elasticity. The finished dough is pressed into blocks and passed through a multi-roller sheeting system to create thin sheets of uniform thickness. At the ravioli forming machine, the beef filling is deposited from above, while 2 sheets of dough advance from opposite directions. A pair of molding rollers simultaneously press, cut, and seal, producing hundreds of square ravioli in a continuous cycle, ensuring consistent sealing and size. The ravioli strips then enter a blanching machine, where hot water quickly cooks the pasta and separates each piece. Immediately afterward, the product is transferred into a deep cold water bath for a shock cooling step. This helps set the shape and enhances mechanical strength before canning. Immediately afterward, the cooled ravioli enter a rotary portioning machine. As the table rotates, the product is evenly distributed and guided into dosing chambers, with approximately 14 pieces dropping precisely into each can before the conveyor moves them onward to the sauce filling stage. Open cans pass beneath the filling system, where hot tomato sauce is pumped directly from holding tanks at rates approaching 600 cans per minute. Once the standard fill level is reached, the cans are rapidly sealed at high speed, locking in structure before thermal processing. To ensure complete coverage, the cans pass through a continuous inversion and rotation system, undergoing more than 10 flipping cycles. This motion allows the sauce to flow into every gap and fully coat all pasta surfaces. The cans are then fed into a rotary pressure retort. Within this controlled pressurized environment, temperatures reach approximately 250 degrees Fahrenheit and are maintained for about 45 minutes. The combination of heat and continuous rotation completes the final cooking stage, while ensuring safe sterilization for long-term shelf stability. After exiting the retort, the cans are rapidly cooled on conveyor lines before moving into the labeling area, where they receive the iconic image of Hector Boyardee. At the end of the process, products are case-packed by batch and distributed to supermarket and convenience store networks across the United States. From this solid foundation, Chef Boyardee has expanded far beyond ravioli, creating mass-market hits such as beefaroni, spaghetti and meatballs, and lasagna, with total annual production sustained at over 300 million units. While formats and flavors may vary, they all operate around one clear philosophy: delivering a fast, filling, stable meal that's easy to rely on again and again. The United States is often considered one of the most animal-loving countries in the world, where abandoning a pet can even lead to jail time. Yet ironically, there are invasive species that Americans truly despise, to the point that they spend around $300 million each year just to control and reduce their populations. So what has driven such an animal-loving nation to launch such aggressive eradication efforts? And what have they done to wage this uncompromising ecological battle against these dangerous invaders? In today's video, Agriculture Insight will take you straight into the most intense ecological front lines across the United States, where humans are not only fighting to protect ecosystems, but also transforming seemingly uncontrollable threats into new sources of economic value. Considered one of the most hated animals in American history, Asian carp not only disrupt ecosystems with their astonishing reproduction rate, but also turn every boat trip into a gamble, suddenly launching out of the water and shattering the river's calm in an instant. Not native to the region, Asian carp were introduced to the United States in the 1970s to clean up aquaculture ponds. However, after flooding events, they escaped into the Mississippi River and triggered a massive invasion. Within just a few decades, their population grew to tens of millions, spreading thousands of kilometers and appearing in more than 20 states. Asian carp, especially silver carp, have an extremely strong startle response because their vibration sensing system is highly sensitive to low-frequency sound waves from boat engines. In the wild, leaping out of the water is a defense mechanism against predators. But in American rivers, every engine noise becomes an alarm, causing them to instinctively jump 2 to 3 meters into the air. These sudden leaps have injured many boaters and disrupted river tourism. Beneath the surface, their impact is even more destructive. They consume vast amounts of plankton, the foundation of the entire food chain, leading to situations where carp make up 70 to 90% of total fish biomass in some areas. When a single species dominates nearly an entire river, it is no longer an invasion, it is an ecosystem replacement. The dislike for Asian carp is so strong that a more than $10 million electric barrier has been constructed beneath the Chicago Sanitary and Ship Canal. Conductors placed 6.4 meters below the water continuously emit direct current pulses 34 times per second, creating an invisible wall that stuns fish on contact and forces them to turn back. However, this is only a temporary solution to block their spread. Alongside the electric barrier, river states also organize large-scale harvesting campaigns. Long encircling nets, up to 100 meters, are deployed to gradually corral fish into a confined area, then hauled in using mechanical winches. In addition, authorities even encourage local residents and commercial fishers to participate in reducing wild populations. The United States does not farm Asian carp for business. They exploit it as an ecological countermeasure. Fish caught from the Mississippi River are first sorted and inspected for quality, with those that do not meet size or condition standards being removed. Next comes the preliminary cleaning stage. The fish are washed with high-pressure cold water to remove mud, debris, and microorganisms on the surface. They are then transferred to the gutting and filleting area, where specialized machinery or skilled workers remove the heads, internal organs, and separate the flesh from the bones. Because carp contain many small intramuscular bones, an important step involves mechanical deboning or processing to produce meat that is easier to consume. The fish meat is then passed through a secondary inspection and refining system to eliminate any remaining small bones. Depending on the intended use, the meat may be kept as fillets, minced into fish paste, or cut into chunks. From there, Asian carp products marketed under the commercial name kopi are exported to various markets, particularly in Asia, where they are consumed as a familiar food source.